And now to present the special program for today here in the Hall of Philosophy. We are focusing this week on the journey of the universe, and we are bringing to you a notable roster of interfaith scholars. I think perhaps Mary Evelyn, seated behind me, would like to know this is the most religiously diverse group of speakers on any one subject at any one time that we have ever had at Chautauqua. So thank you so much for that. You will not only get to hear about a most important issue of our day, but to experience it through the eyes and the faith understanding of people from faiths from around the world. Today's distinguished guest is Mary Evelyn Tucker. She is a senior research scholar at Yale University, co-director of the Forum on Religion and Ecology, and she will present for us the keynote lecture today. Mary Evelyn and her husband, John Grimm, will present tomorrow's lecture. John will be the presenter tomorrow. They are the producers and directors of the award-winning documentary film, Journey of the Universe. How many of you saw it yesterday? It's my understanding that how many of you wanted to see it yesterday and didn't get a chance to? You will get a chance to see it. It will be shown again today. Mary Evelyn will be basing her lecture today and all of this week's lectures upon the journey of the universe. The film was shown to a full-capacity house, and anybody who was turned away because it was sold out, you will be pleased to know there will be another showing at 5:30 in the Chautauqua Cinema, and that Mary Evelyn and John will graciously once again do a talkback. Don't miss it. It is beautiful, amazing, and enlightening. And do take your young people. It's a multi-generational film. Also, I want you to know that Mary Evelyn's book, Journey of the Universe, will be sold today right across the way in front of the Hall of Missions. So I have to ask two things of you. One, get your book signed. But the first one is, when she's finished with her lecture and our question period afterwards, it'll be about 3:15, and we're going to come and walk her right across so that she can begin signing her books. So if you'd give her some passageway through, I know you'll all want to talk to her, but we need to have her so that you can have your books signed. And now, before I ask her to come, it is my special privilege and pleasure to say a word of grateful thanks to Warren Martin for the Eileen and Warren Martin Lectureship for Emerging Studies in Bible and Theology. He has sponsored now a number of weeks, and always they have been exactly what we described, Emerging Studies in Bible and Theology. Warren Martin has been beyond generous with us, and he has enabled us to have speakers that we would not otherwise have been able to afford to have. Warren, thank you. Bless you so much. And I understand that your daughter, Claudia, is here with you. Is she here somewhere in the audience? If so, Claudia, we greet you. And now, Mary Evelyn, if you would come, and we await your words. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joan, and a special thanks to Warren Martin. I echo that from the bottom of my heart. And Maureen Rivegno as well for helping to organize this. My husband, John Grimm, the stalwart partner that we all depend on. But I really want all of the people who've been working with us for many, many years in the Forum on Religion and Ecology at Harvard, at Yale, in Canada, and elsewhere, to please stand up, because you are the people who have supported our work so well for so many years. Thank you. Let's give them a round of applause. Rachel. And these are the people you'll hear from all during the week. It's going to be a great week. We heard a remarkable talk this morning, which reflected, I think, the yearning for understanding in the human heart, which we all share. That's why we're here aren't we, in this spectacular place? I think what we're trying to do with Journey of the Universe is what we're calling cosmology, which means not just the early universe, but it means the best of modern science with the wisdom of the heart. Science and wisdom, science and humanity, science and religious traditions from all over the world. And so as we created this film and book, we were drawing on these wisdom traditions to infuse it with particularity and yet universality. We'll talk about that this afternoon, but I just wanted to preface this talk with that understanding. As Einstein said, science without religion is lame, and religion without science can be blind. So we need, don't we, that deep, deep infusion. We need also, and this is the topic of my talk today, an integrating story for a sustainable future. We are all aware, as we see our present interconnected global challenges of widespread environmental degradation, climate change, crippling poverty, social inequities, and unrestrained militarism, we know that the obstacles to the flourishing of life's ecosystems and to genuine sustainable development are considerable. In the midst of these formidable challenges, in an era that Paul Crutzen has dubbed the Anthropocene, the geologists are saying we're in a new era because of our imprint around the planet. We are being called then to a new stage of evolutionary history, a new stage of evolutionary history. This new era requires a change of consciousness and values, an expansion of our worldviews and ethics. The evolutionary life impulse moves us forward from viewing ourselves as isolated individuals and competing nation-states to realizing our collective presence as a species with a common origin story and a shared destiny. A common origin story and a shared destiny. That's what Journey is trying to evoke for all of us. The human community has the capacity now to realize our intrinsic unity in the midst of enormous diversity. And most especially, we have the opportunity to see this unity as arising from the dynamics of the evolutionary process itself. That is the new news. In the 150 years since Darwin's Origin of the Species, we have been developing, scientists primarily, for the first time, a scientific story of the evolution of universe, Earth, and humans. We're still discovering the larger meaning of that story, namely our profound connectedness to this process. With the first photograph of Earth from space in 1966 came a new and emerging sense of belonging to our planet. We all remember that moment. It's still iconic, isn't it? In addition, our growing knowledge of evolution continues to give us an expanded sense of the whole. We're beginning to feel ourselves embraced by the evolutionary powers unfolding over time into forms of ever-increasing complexity and consciousness. The elements of our body and all the life forms emerge from the explosion of supernovas. We are stardust. We are realizing, too, that evolution moves forward with transitions, such as the movement from inorganic to matter to organic life, and from single-celled organisms to plants and animals that sweep through the evolutionary unfolding of the universe, the Earth, and humanity. All such transitions come at a time of crisis. This is true in the whole evolutionary process. Again, what we're trying to show in Journey. It's the edge of a knife that's moved forward. These transitions involve tremendous cost, but they result in new forms of creativity. The central reality of our times is that we are in such a transition moment, and in 150,000 years of being Homo sapiens sapiens, we have never had such a challenge before us of how are we going to live as a multicultural planetary civilization. We have to live up to our last names of sapiens. Surrounding this moment is an awakening to a new consciousness that's challenging older paradigms of the human as an isolated being in a random, purposeless universe. This is being called the Great Transition, the Great Turning, the Awakening. And this is not just esoteric New Age stuff. This is coming, as I said, from even the geological community, this movement into a new period, a geological era. Many such thinkers are suggesting that our consciousness is gradually shifting from valuing hyper-individualism and independence to embracing interdependence and a kinship on a vast scale. If you know the Earth Charter, which I worked on, that is the first declaration of interdependence, you see, not just of independence. This transition will take time, but the ecological sciences are showing us this interconnectedness of all life. The Enlightenment values of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are being reconfigured in this context. Life now includes the larger community of the earth and its life forms. And Paul Wadeau has worked on the Great Apes Project for years. If the great apes that share 99% of our DNA go extinct, what does that mean in our period of time? This is what we are called to, a sense of the extension of our understanding of life community. That's what our individual freedom requires, responsibility to community, and happiness is defined as being something more than material goods, I think we understand. So in this spirit, we are moving from an era dominated by competing nation states to one that is birthing a sustainable, multicultural, planetary civilization. That is our great work, as Thomas Berry would call it. And the Chinese, by the way, are working towards what they are calling ecological civilization to manage their tremendous crisis of the environment. They recognize this is a civilizational transformation. So such a transformation, while marked by struggle and conflict, is occurring within the context of this emerging understanding of journey of the universe. The thousands of organizations dedicated to reconfiguring sustainability are an indicator of this shift. You know, we work at the School of Forestry and Environmental Studies at Yale, the oldest school in the country dedicated to the environment. Many of our great environmentalists have come out of there, including Aldo Leopold, who graduated in 1909. These students are so vibrant to support the life systems of our planet. It gives us great hope. But that's what Journey of the Universe is trying to evoke, isn't it? A sense of hope and purpose and possibility for these next generations. These organizations all over the planet have been described by Paul Hawkins in his book called Blessed Unrest. Hundreds of thousands of groups working towards sustainability. Over the past century, the various branches of science have begun to weave together this story of a historical cosmos. It's a story. This isn't just a place, but it's a story of 13.7 billion years of unfolding. This has been called the Epic of Evolution by E.O. Wilson, Cosmic Evolution by Eric Chasen. The magnitude of this universe story is beginning to dawn on humans as we awaken to a realization of the vastness and complexity of this process. That's partly why we were so enchanted this morning. But the question still is, how do we live in this vast and complex universe? What does it mean to birth a child into it, to care for a child into it, to sustain life systems? I have traveled throughout Asia, and I can tell you life systems, human and otherwise, are at great risk, where 2/3 of our people live. So at the same time that this story has become available to the human community, we are conscious that we are in a multi-dimensional environmental crisis, and that the rapid species and habitat destruction that is taking place around the planet is such that we are in a 6th extinction period. We need then to step back to assimilate our cosmological context. If scientific cosmology gives us an understanding of the origins and unfolding of the universe, philosophical reflections on scientific cosmology gives us a sense of our place in the universe. It's not enough just to know the science. We need to understand where we fit, what is our role, that we are birthed out of these systems, including every element of our body. If we are so radically affecting the story by extinguishing other life forms and destroying our own nest, what does this imply about our ethical sensibilities or our sense of the sacred? What does this imply about our sense of the sacred? Which is why for almost 20 years we've been working with these tremendous colleagues to try and awaken the various religious traditions around the globe to come forward with a ethics for the environment, eco-justice, social justice, environmental justice. As science then reveals to us the particular intricacy of the web of life, we realize we are unraveling it, although unwittingly in part. Until recently, we have not been fully conscious of the deleterious consequences of our drive toward economic progress and rapid industrialization. This is not our fault entirely. It's the unintended consequences of rapid industrialization and modernization. But now is our time to rethink our responsibility. So as we begin to glimpse how deeply embedded we are in complex ecosystems and how dependent on other life forms, this is about water, air, soil, and the fire of life. This is simple stuff. It's about what are we going to eat and drink and give to our children. It is that simple. And yet, aren't these part of the sacramental traditions around the world? To say bread, wine, even air, fire. These are holy elements, you see. So as we begin to glimpse how deeply embedded we are in these processes, we need to come forward to a sense that we are not mutually destructive with these natural systems, but mutually enhancing human-earth relations to be still emerging. That's the goal of this journey of the universe. Now, let me just tell you a quick story that reveals what's happened at the American Museum of Natural History in New York that gives us this sense of universe and earth evolution. And as part of the exciting movement of science to, of course, make science more available to a larger public, as we heard this morning. But have any of you been to the Hall of the Universe at the Natural History Museum? So it's truly an iconic place. A huge glass encasement called the Rose Center. You go through this large simulation of the Great Flaring Forth, the Big Bang. Then you walk down something that's like the Guggenheim Museum, a huge spiral staircase, right? And each step is like several 100 million years and so on. So you're physically trying to understand this. These are big, big numbers. But we get to the bottom of that staircase, and there is one human hair under glass, and it says, "This is all of human history." This is all of human history. You see, it begins to image for us where we are and what is our responsibility. So that in such a short period of time, 200 years since the Industrial Revolution and the scientific revolution, are we going to shut down these systems of life, or are we going to allow for the flourishing of life for the earth community, for your children and their children? So the whole of the earth also reveals the incredible knowledge that we have learned fairly recently, plate tectonics and the vents in the bottom of the oceans where early life may have emerged and so on. So science is giving us this story of universe and earth emergence. But if you go as well into the Hall of Biodiversity and you see young children stand there looking up at the wall, and there's a great octopus above, and there's birds and insects and fish and so on, and you see this explosion of biodiversity of life, which is being celebrated there. Over the last 65 million years, these life systems evolved. But there on the floor is this plaque that says we're in the midst of this sixth extinction period caused by humans. We're the asteroid. The last extinction 65 million years ago, with the dinosaurs being wiped out, was caused by an asteroid in the Yucatan Peninsula. So this sense, the museum is no longer just an objective reporting on science. It has as well, what can we do? Here's some of the destruction, and here's some of the creative restoration of ecosystems that are happening around the world. So we're moving into not just objective science, but the participatory sense of the human as part of these systems of life. And that's what Journey is inviting us into. It was very striking at the museum when we went there after the Harvard conferences. We did 3 years of conferences at Harvard on the world's religions and their ecological dimensions. And in 1998, with some trepidation, we went to the museum and spoke to the provost, then provost still, Mike Novacek. And we thought, oh, science in this museum, it's going to be a little tricky. And what we wanted to do was bring the different world religions there. Bill Moyers interviewed them, all the different representatives from the traditions. We had people from the science community, the World Bank, from Columbia, and so on. This provost said to us, we want you there. We want you in the IMAX theater, which at that time cost $10,000 to rent or whatever. He said, we want you there because it is so clear what is happening to our planet. And we as scientists cannot just stand aside. And he said, because what happened was we were just hiring ornithologists, people who study birds, and of the 6 people who were finalists, 4 of them had had their birds go extinct while they were studying them. And this is what a 6th extinction period means. You see, scientists are now witnessing the last of a species. Can you imagine what that means? Can you imagine what that means for a next generation to realize they are not going to see some of these species? That was such a wake-up call for the museum. That's why they wanted to bring in religion, culture, spirituality, and ethics, a new understanding of this deepening dialogue of science and religion. So, I come then to say, one more time, what is humankind in relation to 13.7 billion years of universe history? I think these are wonderful questions, by the way, for us to ponder. You know, they seem big and abstract, but they are changing, I would suggest, the whole nature of who we are as humans. What is our place in the framework of a 4.6 billion-year evolutionary process just to give us this magnificent Earth with this lake, these trees, this special, special place? You know, it was 1 billion years before even the first cell appeared. 3.5 billion years for life to emerge in complexity. Isn't that just incredible? What does this mean for us as humans? What does it mean for our spiritual and religious traditions? We need to open to the fact that maybe, just maybe, the divine, however we might call him or her, is larger than even any tradition can express. This opens us to wonder, awe, beauty, mystery as never before possible in human history. So how then, if we ask these questions, are we going to foster the stability and the integrity of these life systems? How are we going to enter into the Earth community? This is not simply, then, this narrative of evolution just a story out there, but it's a transformative cosmological story that engages human energy for a future that is sustaining and sustainable. So in other words, what we are in search of is not just new energy systems. We are in search of alternative energy and so on. But we are also in search of human energy to make it into this next phase of a sustainable future. And that is a continually renewable resource. And this telling of a story that places us within these systems can awaken and evoke that energy for the future. So why are stories so important? Cosmological stories have shaped human communities forever. It's why Genesis is so important for Jewish and Christian communities. So since the earliest expressions of human culture, humans have struggled to understand and define our place in the universe. We've developed cosmologies, which are stories that describe where we've come from, where we're going. The religious and cultural traditions we've honored for millennium all bear witness to this deep desire to find meaning in what we see and feel around us. Over the last 2 centuries, however, the scientific paradigm has taken root and in many places has become a dominant worldview. It tends to objectify what it describes, and the scientific method is important. But in recent years, the scientific and religious cosmologies have coexisted uneasily, as we know, in our own society. Some scientists and philosophers have come to the conclusion that the universe, while appearing to follow certain natural laws, is largely a random and accidental accretion of objects with little meaning and certainly no purpose. That is, by and large, the scientific paradigm that dominates our universities, and it certainly is at Yale and other places that I have taught. And the question is, Stephen Jay Gould, who is a brilliant scientist, would say, well, of course it's a random universe. It has no purpose, but it doesn't bother me. It's kind of like, have a nice day. Not everyone gets up with have a nice day because it's a meaningless universe. You know, most people want to have a deeper sense that their purpose is connected to a larger purpose of the life force. We are connected not just to ourselves, but the continuation of, that's why your children and grandchildren are so important to you. It's part of this powerful life force that's way more mysterious than we understand, and we want to be connected to it. So, one of the aims of Journey of the Universe is to counteract this view with a presentation of this dynamic, creative universe. Relying on the best of modern science, we discover how we're part of this ongoing journey and shaping its future form. This is absolutely essential for ecological, economic, and social transformation on behalf of our emerging planetary community. The goal, then, of Journey is to tell the story of cosmic and Earth evolution, drawing on scientific knowledge in a way that makes it relevant and moving. So in each chapter of the book and throughout the film, we took one scientific idea but tried to give it a metaphor that people would understand, like the contraction of our lungs and the expansion of the universe kind of thing. Then what emerges is this poetic story that evokes emotions of awe and excitement, fear and joy, belonging and responsibility. Most audiences have been awakened to awe and wonder and beauty and complexity. How can we not? So the universe story is a dramatic one. Through billions of years of evolution, triumph and disaster have been only a hair's breadth apart. We're saying constantly that we're on the edge of a knife. Violence and creativity are pervasive. This may change even our ideals of what is evil. When we see this is not just a benign universe, creativity has come out of clash and chaos and loss. But the ability of matter to organize and reorganize itself is remarkable. So the self-organizing dynamics of the universe that we're speaking about in this film, in other words, how did galaxies emerge from very simple systems? How did stars emerge? How did a solar system emerge? There are these self-organizing dynamics that go forward. That's more than science can explain, okay? And even some of the great scientists at Princeton, where we were teaching in the fall, said, we don't really know fully how galaxies emerge, you see? But this ability to organize and reorganize itself is absolutely essential to this process. We're coming to realize that the energy released at the very beginning of this dynamic process in the human is becoming reflective and exploring its own journey. You know, in the film, and the tradition I study most in Confucianism, which has probably influenced more people on the planet than any other tradition, considering the size of China, the Confucians look at this great heaven, earth, and human. That's their cosmology. But they say that humans are the mind and heart of heaven and earth. And mind and heart is one character. It's not two. It's not two, so it's not separating how we think and how we feel. But it's saying we are the consciousness and the conscience of this whole process. Isn't that a magnificent idea? So that's the part of this idea in Journey of the Universe, that simple hydrogen has become a vibrant living planet with beings now able to investigate both how this has happened and to imagine a life-sustaining future. If we don't connect these two, we're missing our role, our place, our destiny. It's not enough just to know how this happened. It's what is the future. So waking up to our fundamental relationship with the cosmos will be a means of re-engagement with life. You know, we're living in a society that is, I think, deeply, consciously and unconsciously depressed because of the amount of problems that we are facing, social, economic, political, and environmental. You read the newspaper and you go into a state of disempowerment, despair, paralysis, right? Look at any paper in this country. The question is, how can we be realistic about the size and scale of these problems, but still ignite hope? If we do not ignite hope, we will become ourselves part of the sixth extinction period. And that is a task of religious communities in a very special way. And I can tell you, at Yale, we are dealing with young people who are so aware that their future is foreshortened, that they want to find ways to contribute, to have hope. You know this from your own children. So the journey of the universe, then, is trying to re-engage us with life, with possibility, with creativity, that enables us to connect more deeply with the universe and Earth of which we are a part. In doing this, we will appreciate the need for this sustainable human presence on the planet. Although you're all familiar, I hope, with sustainable development at the UN and the Rio conferences and so on, but I like to say your relationship, your best relationships in life are not just sustainable. You want them to be flourishing, right? That's what I want it to be with John and so on. We're about to celebrate our 35th anniversary next week. So we're working for the flourishing of life for the Earth community, not just its sustainability. But thus, this integrated story of the origin and development of the universe, of Earth, and of humans could become an inspiring vision for our times. This is because this story is giving us a sense of our common evolutionary heritage and shared genetic lineage with other life forms. This new understanding of the kinship we share with each other and with all life could establish the foundations for rediscovering our past and sustaining a flourishing future. We can be inspired by the scientific view of nested interdependence, from galaxies and stars to planets and ecosystems, so that we sense how personally we are woven into the fabric of life. We are part of this ongoing journey, and we will write its next chapters. From this perspective, we can see that our current deleterious, destructive habits toward the environment are unsustainable. In an evolutionary framework, the damage we are causing is immense, indeed cataclysmic. We can thus recognize ecological, economic, and social change as not only necessary but inevitable. But this will require expanding our frame of reference and broadening our worldview. We are already in the process of doing this as we create the foundations for a sustainable future. Everyone has a role in this. This is what Thomas Berry would call the great work of our time, that the contributions of humanity around the globe to creating, for the first time in human history, a multicultural, multi-religious, but planetary civilization for the future of life. That's what we can all do. I hope you and your children and grandchildren will participate in it too. Thank you very much.
All right, my friends, I think many of you have been here before. You know how we have questions at Chautauqua. We ask you to line up at these two mics. We do have two, yes. And we will start over here with this mic. We have someone there, and then we will move to this microphone. And we have a good length of time here for the questions. So think carefully and broadly for your questions, and we will begin right here.
Thank you. Having traveled in other parts of the world and being so aware that other peoples of the world are not as conscious as we are. I know there are world environmental conferences, but to get to the people who are actually influencing this horrible water and the air and how does that message get across the world when you get down to the actual people who are going to do something about it?
Well, this is a big question, but I should explain a little bit more about Journey of the Universe isn't only a film. It went on PBS. About 80% of the PBS stations showed it here in this country. It's also a book, as you know, but it's also a series of interviews which shows how scientists are realizing and telling their part of this story within the context of a universe story. And as well, there's 10 interviews with people who are doing work, practical work, environmental work, eco-cities, new ecological economics, food issues, race. We've got two extraordinary African Americans speaking about how this influences race, Native Americans, and so on. We've also have translations of the book in Korean, in French, Italian. The film has just been translated into Spanish, and you can buy it on Amazon with the Spanish translation. Someone is about to do it in German. We took it to Costa Rica in March at the request of a number of people there, and very, very positive feedback, a lot of interest in Latin America. We took it last year in March, that's our spring break at Yale, to China for several weeks and showed it at a number of universities all across China. And Chinese TV wants to show it, which would be millions and millions of people who would see it. So, and the students there, I can tell you, are absolutely also looking for this kind of unifying story about how they can make a difference. It's just, a student in Shanghai at this wonderful university, Fudan, came up after the film, and she said, this is one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. But I live in Shanghai, a city of 34 million people. I've never really seen nature. You see, this is what we're up against. So the UN is about to launch a new Millennium Development Goals, and John and I just gave a talk in New York at the Princeton Club where the head of UNDP, who's going to hold conversations around the world, about 90 different countries, is keen to use Journey of the Universe as a convening story. This is a conversation beginner, you see. It's not the answer, but it's a beginner. Yeah. Yes.
Yes, I have a concern that our traditional theology that puts humankind at the top removes us from being embedded in creation. And I just would like your comments on that. I see it as a huge impediment to where we need to move.
Thank you. And that's why we did these conferences for 3 years with theologians, about 200 key theologians. Heather Eaton will speak to this for the Christian tradition. And there's 10 volumes. You see that Christianity ecology, Judaism ecology, Buddhism ecology, that are trying to respond to how these traditions will move into their ecological phase. So we have a lot of extraordinary theologians and ethicists and so on working on this issue. There's a large website for the Forum on Religion and Ecology. If you Google religion and ecology, there's statements from all the world's religions and so on. So we're at the beginning stages, but it will happen. And if I just spoke for 5 minutes, less than that, about Christianity. You see, I just gave a retreat to a group of nuns last weekend, and this question came up. And they love Journey of the Universe. So if we take the beginning of John's Gospel, in the beginning was the Word, the Logos. The Logos is the inner ordering principle of all reality. It's from the very beginning that there's a sacred dimension to this process. If we take that with St. Paul's epistle of a cosmic Christ in the universe, that there is this huge sense that's larger than just the historical Christ, that there's a sacramental dimension to all of reality, but there's an incarnational dimension, you see, that appears in human form in this 2,000-year history. But Teilhard de Chardin, you see, and others would say this is infused throughout the whole process. All right? And that's what theologians and others are working on. Yes?
First, thank you so much for your incredible work and that you've been doing on this. They talk about sometimes before there's hope, there's a dark night of the soul. And the talk today made me feel a little bit like the dark night of the soul before I can get involved in hope. I ended up feeling like, gosh, we feel like we're a cancer on this planet almost, just rapidly reproducing and causing havoc. But I'll get there, how I'm going to get the hope. I'm curious to know where you think or how you understand consciousness in all of this. What its role, what is it, and its import.
Okay, that's a big question. But I would say, this is just my answer, but I've worked closely with Brian Swimme for many, many years as well, and John Grimm and many others. So what we're trying to say is that these processes that emerged over time, and we worked with scientists for 10 years to make that film and do this book and so on, so that every word in this project is carefully thought through for a question like that. But if we said in a very general way that consciousness does not reside only in the human, even though we'd like to think it does, but it doesn't. If you have a dog or a cat or a pet, you know how alive and intelligent they are. If you see migrating patterns of birds or caribou or fish or turtles, deep intelligence. So there's deep intelligence imprinted throughout these processes of life systems clearly. And in the film, we worked with Ursula Goodenough, an extraordinary cell biologist, to say, what word would you use even for a cell that is allowing something to come into the cell, okay? And she said, discernment. Discernment, isn't that interesting? You see? Now, we would also use the word sentience to describe the more than human animal world. We're animals, right? But the more than human animal world and the animal behavior work that has emerged in the last number of years, saying, well, animals have culture. Franz de Waal saying they have morality. Jane Goodall, we understand fully how it's more than companion animals. These are highly intelligent creatures, as, again, Paul Bodeau and the Great Apes Project will tell us. So what we would say is there's intelligence imprinted throughout, and we can call it sentient, we can call it discernment in the various life forms. We call it self-reflexive intelligence for the human. But some people would say, well, dolphins and whales are pretty self-reflective too, and they sing and they communicate and so on. So that's the exciting thing about our time. You see, that the relationships are being built up by these tremendous discoveries of intelligence throughout. Yes?
First, I applaud everything that you are doing already. But I wonder how in this country, particularly with the grip of the fossil fuel industry, and at the same time when the populations in religions seem to be on the decline, how we can get that word out, how we can get through to people. I think there's a greater sense of denial at the same time that there's this appreciation or consciousness coming up.
Yes, I think that's true, which is why I think some people feel paralyzed, disempowered, and so on. We're in a very, very difficult political period. I should probably avoid politics a little bit here because there may be, wider opinions. But I did say yesterday at the film that when I go abroad, the rest of the world is asking us to join the rest of the world, and people seem to agree with that, for sure, right? But I think there's also, one way to describe it is a last gasp for what some people perceive as an American way of life that is at stake. I mean, the first George Bush said, I'm not going to Rio because the American way of life is not up for grabs. And that's what's played out in the UN, you see. So I don't have an answer. I went to college in Washington, D.C. I was very politically involved with civil rights and the anti-Vietnam War and so on. Very, very involved. I went off to Japan to have some distance. As a matter of fact, I said, I'm not coming back till Nixon's out of office. And that worked, actually. But it also changed my life because I began to see these other traditions and so on. So no, I don't think anyone has an answer to your very important question of what I would call political gridlock. But I would say, and also your other part of it, that the churches are losing membership and so on. But I think the grassroots movements, the movements in communities around this country, a Chautauqua institution that has survived this long, says the people power, the power of civil society, and that includes religious traditions that are yearning for transformation. We are meant for creativity. We are not meant for destruction. And so, despite all odds, despite the seminaries being a little bit asleep on these issues, we feel there can be breakthroughs. And I think there's many people like Joan who've been at this for a long, long time with the National Religious Partnership on the Environment and so on, the NCC work that she's done. I think there are people who have made a difference, and we can still make a difference. So as idealistic as that sounds, I'll stick to it. Thank you, though.
Hi, Mary Evelyn. Thank you very much for your very provocative and inspiring talk, as well as all your work, which I'm a follower of. And I hadn't realized you were the one that got Nixon out. It didn't work when I went abroad. But anyway, what I wanted to ask you is that about a year ago, I heard the Dalai Lama speak. And one of the things he said was addressing the problems of poverty in the world, the decline of the environment, the conflicts going on everywhere. He says that, in effect, the world religions have failed to answer the ethical problems. I'm really oversimplifying and paraphrasing, but as I understood his message, what he was saying was that instead of basing the future of our ethics on religion, because we have such diversity in religion and so many people believing so many different things, so many different stories of origin, we had to base the new ethics on our common humanity. And I wondered if you would address that.
Yeah. So I do have a whole other lecture, and with PowerPoint and so on world religions and ecology, where I begin by saying our views of nature come from religion, but also from secular environmentalism or secular groups, and humanitarianism being one of them. Okay? It also comes from something that my colleague at Yale is called biophilia, and Ed Wilson does this too, the feeling for nature. So there's a spectrum, isn't there, of ways in which our values for nature come forward. But they've been largely shaped by the world's religions, which is why these great scholars like Chris Chappell and James Miller and David Haberman are going to speak about the Asian religions and their views of nature. But I think, and the humanitarian view is actually what has driven environmentalism in this country. Although there's some terrific books that speak to the Presbyterianism of John Muir, the Presbyterianism of some of the very early environmentalists and so on, deeply moved by their religious roots. So, you know, I've interacted with the Dalai Lama in large settings, you know, over time, and I have nothing but respect for him, absolutely nothing but respect. He's a remarkable human being. So my feeling is all hands on deck. The Nature Writers, Orion Magazine, is a tremendous outreach. I mean, Terry Tempest Williams, Kathleen Dean Moore, these people writing about their experiences in nature, Barry Lopez. So the short answer is yes, we need them all. Yeah, thank you.
I guess I don't see what's so bad about a random universe. I see that as a great opportunity to give the universe our own meaning, you know, what we think the universe should mean to us as a society. And I think that's what humans have been doing since before recorded history. You know, for the ancient Egyptians, the meaning of the universe was you know, to make sure that you had good standing in the afterlife. For the American Indians, the meaning of the universe was oneness with nature. You know, for our current societies, you know, in the past couple hundred years, the meaning of the universe for us has been centered around money, which I think is kind of a problem. What do you think, would you say we need to turn our meaning of the universe towards?
That's a super question, absolutely excellent, and really to the heart of the matter. But let me put it back in the sense your last comment there of the meaning of the universe is money right now for many people, not just in America. But could that be possibly related to the disenchantment of the world, that there's no meaning in the world? You see, so the meaning goes into economics and finance, and Wall Street becomes the place where young people want to go, and so on. I mean, here's the issue. A couple really important issues out of that question. One is, it's not that people just created meaning for the world. The Native American traditions, and we are adopted into the Crow tribe in Montana, and John, my husband, is a specialist in indigenous traditions, and these are people who have kept alive their traditions despite immense odds and tremendous poverty. The Sundance that we have gone to on many occasions, they are saying those places are sacred places, the high plains. Right now they're in Washington, in fact, trying to advocate for their sacred places. They are saying, this is sacred. Birds are sacred. The feathers from the birds. They're praying with these things. The tradition, again, of East Asia, and James Miller will do this for Taoism, the Chinese do not have what we have created in the West, which would be the fact-value split, okay? That science has the facts, religion has the values, we're split. That's why I began with this statement from Einstein. The Chinese, in their traditions, and we can talk about the modern period, but would say the world is infused with value. And in fact, self-cultivation is all about cultivation in relation to the changes of the seasons. Why do the Japanese love the cherry blossoms? And why do they have flowers in their tokonoma and do these things in relation to nature? It's cultivating oneself in relation to these dynamic processes, you see? So if we strip value from nature, we can strip mine mountaintops in Appalachia. There's no value there except an economic value for short-term energy. I find that the Greek Orthodox patriarch, Bartholomew, one of the great leaders on these issues, look up his statements. In 1997 in Santa Barbara, he said, this treatment of the environment is ecological sin. These are crimes against creation. Why? Because the Greek Orthodox tradition says the world is an icon of the divine presence infused with light and energy and beauty. How can we destroy the created order? You see, that is, each one of these worldviews, I'm trying to say, has got to be brought into the conversation in the sense, I'll just end here because I feel really strongly about this, but it's more complicated than I can answer. You know, it's really, really important. But here's one of the last gasp efforts to save the environment that's playing itself out in environmental groups across the country and at Yale Forestry School. Great, great place. One of the fountainheads of our environmental movement. It's called Ecosystems Services. Have you heard about this? So it's valuing nature for what nature does for us. So a wetland filters the water, so it's good for us, right? So everything is in relation to how we put a monetary value on nature for what it's going to give us. So they're thinking it's going to play out in Wall Street. It's not really playing out. But that, to me, is one of the last gasp efforts to monetize nature to protect it. You see, because we have lost the sense, there's an intrinsic value to nature itself. You know, why do I keep saying it births us? It gives us our life. It gives us our water. So monetizing nature and intrinsically valuing nature are on the opposite sides, you see? Can we talk later? Or did you want to say something else?
Oh, not really. I just would have felt weird walking away while you're still answering my question.
Felt weird with what?
I just would have felt weird walking away while you're still answering my question.
Oh, okay. I got it. Thank you. Let's talk. Okay?
All right.
Yep.
Thank you very much. This was very enlightening. And what I'm hoping is you can define for me what you say there is a new evil. You know, you use the word evil. And somebody mentioned the fossil fuel industry, but it was once, you know, the generator of all good things. But you're from Washington, D.C. originally?
No.
No?
New York.
New York, but you were in Washington.
I went to college there,
right.
Yeah.
Is that not the place where we need to address whatever the evil is, and how is your work? Is it the end run that you're going to take to get your message across, and how can we help?
Yeah. Well, thank you. You know, again, I don't want to make this about politics per se. This is, in certain ways, an end run. Yeah, I mean, it's very clear, and foundations have given huge amounts of money to try and change the climate discussion in this country, and it's not happened. That includes Ford Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation. I'm on a climate central group at Princeton that we spend half an hour talking about how we can get someone watching television who's not reaching for his chips or her chips to pay attention to a message on the climate. I mean, it's almost ludicrous. It is so, the group is good. It's good scientists, but what I'm saying is, you know, it's not just an end run. It's trying to get the civil rights movement really began as a religious movement. When Martin Luther King said this is a moral issue, it sparked change. When we say the environment and social and economic justice connected to it is a moral issue, we have a possibility of change. That's the movement. Be happy to have you join it. I'm not going to lead this movement, but there's plenty of people who can do it. Okay? Yeah, lots of people. Yes.
Though obviously I don't look old enough to have participated in the first Earth Day in 1970. I still remember it. And it's now been 2 generations. And not much has changed. Yes, we've gotten lead out of gasoline, and the Clean Water Act, which strangely enough was a Nixon program, sort of puts me in my place, I guess. There's not been much change. And when I hear the discussion that this shouldn't be a political discussion, what you're trying to do is change how people, societies, governments approach the issue. And over the years, we've tried placing economic value with carbon taxes, for example, and it seems that folks are looking out for what they perceive to be their economic goodwill first. And this is spreading through developing countries, China and India. That's where they want to be. They want to burn oil and use resources, not cut back. So we're hearing the same things that we've been hearing for 2 generations. What is it that has gone wrong in the last 2 generations, and what specifically are you going to be doing to change the political forces?
Well, as I have tried to say, this film took 10 years. You cannot imagine what it took to do. You cannot imagine. That's our offering. It's an offering that is beyond politics. It's an offering beyond our differences to an awakening of the human heart. That's the offering. The other offering, with many of our colleagues here, there were 800 people who came to Harvard over 3 years to explore what the religions can contribute. I agree that they need to go a lot further, and Joan and I have been talking about this. There's no doubt they need to go further. There's no doubt that the economic and industrialized and corporate powers are hugely strong and hugely in control. But these are our offerings as a counterpoint. And I will say, in China, in 2008, John and I met with the Deputy Minister for the Environment in China, who has been working for 12 years on an environmental ethic for China based on Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. And that sense of an indigenous environmental ethic from their own traditions is what we've been trying to evoke. And so those volumes from Harvard have been translated into Chinese. A lot of the work that we've done on Confucianism and its revival has been translated into Chinese, because the Chinese know politics, of course, control a lot, but so does culture. This is a cultural shift, and at the basis of culture are religions. And the religions are going to die unless they get on board for the environment. That's what our young people care about. So we can talk a long time about what's gone wrong, but we're trying to put forward positive things that people can enter into. Okay? Let's talk afterwards.
I, of course, always get to be the time watcher. So I think we either need 3, 4 short questions, or we need 2 questions that may take a little bit more time, but we are going to have to cut it off exactly at 1:15. Thanks.
Okay, I'll make my question short. I've visited China several times over the last 10 years, 8 times to be exact, and I've seen a huge change economically. Given the strength of free market capitalism, and in the American mind and many minds, its connection to freedom and democracy, what kind of economic system would you see replacing free market capitalism, which is a huge problem in our Earth, the ecology of our Earth?
Another small question in a minute. Exactly. Why not? But you see, when you get into one thing, you get into everything else, right? And so when we started these Harvard conferences, we had economists there, we had scientists there, we had policy people there, because we said the religious community's got to be in touch with these other people. So there's a robust movement of ecological economics. There's a robust movement of socially responsible investment, which began with many of the religious communities in their investments and so on. If you Google the New Economic Institute, started by our latest dean, Gus Beth, who's done a whole book called A New Manifesto for America. I urge you to look at it. It's quite powerful. He said 40 years ago, he founded NRDC. He was the head of UN Development Program and so on. But he said, we need other tactics. We need religion, and we need a new economics. There is absolutely no doubt about it. In our conversation in the educational series of Journey of the Universe, I interview Richard Norgaard, who's one of the founders of ecological economics. We have in place a lot of things. It's the will for this transformation.
My wife and I live quite a bit down south. 2 years ago, after the 9th week of the season here at Chautauqua, on our way back home, we stayed a couple of nights in Dimmock, Pennsylvania, where there's a lot of hydrofracking going on. We had not really learned much about it until that experience, when we were told right away after our arrival, do not drink any of the water coming out of the faucet. And then we heard up and down 24 hours a day, the trucks. And then it gave us focus on finding out more about hydrofracking, and it's a tremendous devastation of our environment. Do you give hydrofracking much room in your perspective and your work on the environment and ecology?
Of course. You know, I mean, if you see Josh Fox's Gasland, he begins in Dimmock, you know, and we taught at Bucknell in the middle of Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is being absolutely ravaged. One of the most pristine areas north of 80, called the Grand Canyon of Pennsylvania, ravaged. My husband's family's from North Dakota, ravaged. I mean, where are the religious communities? And in fairness, the point of Gasland is that many people are in economic straits, and so they sell their land, not understanding what's going to happen. It is, talk about crimes against creation. Across this country, where is the religious community?
Hi. So at the beginning of your lecture, or kind of near the beginning, you had talked about how there was great kind of creative output from loss and pain and destruction and things like that. And then at the end of your lecture, you said that we are inherently creative beings, not destructive beings. And I'm totally on the same level as you with your idealism and all that stuff, but I was wondering if you could clarify that a little bit, because personally, for me anyway, I think that we're both, and I think that in order to really understand nature and do the best we can with nature, we kind of have to put those two together and really understand how they affect each other. So I was just wondering if you could clarify a little bit or put your input. That's
another small question. Well, and that's what theodicy is about, and different theologies and so on. No, what I was trying to say, and the lady who asked the question too about evil, so what I was trying to say in my talk is that as we begin to understand, and in many ways we're at a beginning of this understanding, right? We are so beginning, and that's, as I repeat, this is a conversation starter, Journey of the Universe and so on. But we do need to see the power of the universe and earth processes in ways that awaken in us both this creative and destructive dynamic, so that we are conscious choosers, you see, towards positive creativity. That's what we need to nurture in each other, our educational systems, our religious systems, and so on. So creativity is at the heart of the givingness of everything. And as Brian Swimme likes to say, it's comprehensive compassion that we're trying to evoke with this sense of creativity. So I can see. I'm just hovering slightly. All right, one final question then.
I've got maybe a different slant on things here. I really appreciate what you've done, and you've drawn us a wonderful picture. We now know where we are. The one solution, of course, is if somebody does it who doesn't know it can't be done, to invent a way to make hydrogen cheaply. But aside from that, if we don't have something really fundamental happen, our society is going to die. We're going to have to cut our population down in huge numbers, and our whole way of life is going to change. We're intrinsically locked into capitalism and the automobile and pollution and so forth. And unless we do something pretty drastic, the future is not bright. I just want you to possibly comment on this.
I think that's what I've been saying all along. So, but I don't think we tell our stories. This is why story and narrative and epic are so important. And we can tell the story that continues this. That's the point. That's our creativity. That's our great work. And I don't think the human was destined to be self-destructive. I think the human was destined, obviously we're going to suffer and we're going to die, but the human is destined to contribute to a larger creative process. And that's what we're being called to. All around the planet, people are doing heroic, life-saving work for a planet that needs our pouring out of comprehensive compassion. Thank you very, very much.